American Airlines Flight 77. American Airlines Flight 77, scheduled transcontinental flight from Washington Dulles International Airport in Virginia to Los Angeles International Airport in California. On September 11, 2001, it was carrying 64 people in total. There were 58 passengers, which included 5 hijackers and 6 crew members. Many of the people on board were civilians, some were military personnel, and one was a well-known television commentator named Barbara Olson. Soon after takeoff, the hijackers got to work. They forced their way into the cockpit and took control of the plane. Instead of continuing west toward Los Angeles, they turned the plane around and headed back toward Washington, D.C. After about an hour in the air, the plane was flown low and fast toward the Pentagon, which is the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, located in Arlington, Virginia. The Boeing 757 struck the western side of the Pentagon at very high speed, close to 530 miles per hour. The crash caused a massive explosion and a raging fire. Everyone on board the plane died instantly, and 125 people inside the Pentagon were also killed because of the impact and fire. Part of the Pentagon's outer walls collapsed because of the force. After the crash, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the National Transportation Safety Board led the investigation. Experts studied the flight data recorders and radar information to understand exactly what happened. They quickly confirmed that the attack was carried out by Al-Qaeda. Experts also pointed out that serious gaps in airport security had allowed the hijackers to bring knives and box cutters onto the flight. United Airlines Flight 93. United Airlines Flight 93 was a passenger flight that normally traveled from Newark International Airport in New Jersey to San Francisco International Airport in California. On September 11, 2001, it was carrying 44 people. This included 37 passengers, 4 hijackers, and 7 crew members. The flight was a normal coast-to-coast service, helping people get from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States for business, personal trips, and vacations. Less than 1 hour after takeoff, 4 hijackers took over the cockpit and gained control of the Boeing 757. Instead of continuing west toward California, the hijackers turned the plane around and headed back toward Washington, D.C. Their goal was to crash the plane into a major government building, possibly the White House or the Capitol. However, the passengers and crew learned about the other attacks happening that morning by making phone calls to family and friends. Realizing they were part of a larger plan, the passengers and crew bravely decided to fight back. They rushed the cockpit, trying to overpower the hijackers. In the middle of the struggle, the hijackers crashed the plane into a field in Stony Creek Township, Somerset County, Pennsylvania. The plane slammed into the ground at a very high speed, close to 580 miles per hour. The impact created a crater about 10 feet deep and 50 feet wide. Sadly, everyone on board died. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the National Transportation Safety Board investigated the crash. They gathered evidence from the crash site that confirmed that the hijackers were linked to the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Experts said the passengers' brave actions most likely saved hundreds or even thousands of lives by preventing the plane from reaching its intended target. Today, the heroes of Flight 93 are honored at the Flight 93 National Memorial, built right at the crash site. American Airlines Flight 965. 20th, 1995, American Airlines Flight 965 was scheduled to fly from Miami International Airport in Florida to Alfonso Bonilla Aragon International Airport near Cali, Colombia. The Boeing 757 was carrying 163 people, including 155 passengers and 8 crew members. Many passengers were traveling to Colombia for the Christmas holidays to visit family or take vacations. After taking off from Miami, the flight was delayed because of bad weather and heavy airport traffic. As the plane neared Cali, air traffic controllers offered the pilots a shortcut to a different runway to save time. The pilots tried to quickly update the plane's navigation system, but accidentally entered the wrong location about 115 miles northeast of their intended path. This caused the plane to turn sharply off course. By the time the pilots realized the mistake, the plane had entered a valley surrounded by tall mountains. The onboard warning system sounded just seconds before impact. The pilots tried to pull up by pushing the engines to full power and lifting the nose, but the speed brakes, which helped slow the plane, were still extended. This made it even harder for the plane to climb. The aircraft hit trees and crashed into a mountainside called El Diluvio, about 17 miles from the airport, at an elevation of around 8,920 feet. Only 4 people survived. Investigators from Colombia and the United States found that the pilot navigation mistakes and poor use of flight systems caused the crash. Experts also said that retracting the speed brakes quickly could have helped the plane clear the mountain. The crash led to big changes in navigation training and better warning systems for pilots. Bergenair Flight 301. In the early evening of February 6, 1996, Birgenair Flight 301 prepared for departure from Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic. The Boeing 757 was set to fly to Frankfurt, Germany, with planned stops in Gander, Canada, and Berlin. On board were 189 people, including 176 passengers and 13 crew members. Many of the travelers were German tourists who had spent their winter vacations in the Caribbean and were now heading home. Just minutes after takeoff, the trouble began. The captain noticed that his airspeed indicator was giving strange readings, but the flight continued. Meanwhile, the first officer's airspeed showed normal values, adding to the confusion. The autopilot, trusting the faulty data from the captain's side, adjusted the plane's nose and engine thrust incorrectly. Thinking the plane was going too fast, the captain further reduced the power. In reality, the plane was flying too slowly to stay in the air. Within seconds, the aircraft stalled, rolled sharply, and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean about 15 miles northeast of Puerto Plata. The force of the impact destroyed the plane instantly. Tragically, no one survived. Investigators later discovered that a pilot tube, the device used to measure airspeed, was blocked, likely by a wasp nest. The plane had been parked without protective covers for days, allowing insects to enter. Experts concluded that the blocked tube led to wrong airspeed readings. They also pointed out that the pilots misread the situation and did not react properly when the stall warnings activated. After this disaster, airlines around the world changed maintenance practices and added stronger training for pilots to handle equipment failures more safely. DHL Flight 611. On the night of July 1, 2002, DHL Flight 611, a Boeing 757 cargo jet, was flying from Bahrain to Brussels with a planned stop in Bergamo, Italy. The plane was operated by DHL International Aviation and was carrying only cargo, not passengers. There were just 2 pilots on board, and the flight was part of DHL's regular package and freight delivery network across Europe. As the aircraft was cruising at about 36,000 feet over southern Germany, it collided mid-air with Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937, a Russian passenger plane traveling from Moscow to Barcelona. The crash happened near the town of Ubelingen. In the collision, the tail of the DHL jet sliced through the fuselage of the Russian Tupolev jet. Both planes broke apart in the sky. Wreckage from both aircraft fell to the ground, and all 71 people aboard both planes died. The DHL jet crashed into a wooded area, while the passenger jet scattered debris over nearby farmland. Investigators found that the air traffic control system was overwhelmed that night. Only one controller was on duty, and some of the radar systems were offline for maintenance. The controller instructed the Russian passenger plane to descend to avoid what he thought was a risk. But at the same time, the plane's onboard collision warning system called TCAS told the pilots to climb. Meanwhile, the DHL pilots also received a TCAS warning telling them to descend, and they correctly followed it. Sadly, both planes ended up descending toward each other at the same time. Britannia Airways Flight 226A. On September 14, 1999, Britannia Airways Flight 226A was flying from Cardiff, Wales to Girona, Spain. The aircraft was a Boeing 757, carrying 236 passengers and 9 crew members. Most of the passengers were British tourists heading to the Costa Brava for a vacation along the Spanish coast. As the plane approached Girona Costa Brava Airport, the weather became very bad. There was a severe thunderstorm with heavy rain and strong winds. The pilots first tried to land on one runway, but changing winds forced them to cancel that attempt. They then circled around and lined up for a second landing on the opposite runway. While coming in through rough winds and rain, just moments before touching down, the runway lights suddenly went out because of a power failure at the airport. This left the pilots without clear visual reference. Without the lights to guide them, the pilots misjudged the landing. The plane hit the ground nose first at about 162 miles per hour. The impact was extremely hard, creating a force of about 3 Gs. The nose landing gear broke immediately, which caused major damage to important systems on the plane. The electrical systems failed, knocking out the brakes, the spoilers, and the thrust reversers that usually help slow down the plane. Worse still, the engines began producing forward thrust when they should have been slowing the plane down. The plane skidded off the runway, crossed a grassy area, hit a small hill, and split into 3 large pieces. Out of everyone on board, only one person died, several days later from injuries. Fly Jamaica Airways Flight 256. Fly Jamaica Airways Flight 256 took off from Cheddi Jagan International Airport in Guyana heading toward Toronto, Canada, on November 9, 2018. The plane was a Boeing 757-200 and was carrying 120 passengers and 8 crew members. Many of the passengers were Canadians returning home after visiting family or spending vacations in Guyana. Around 20 minutes after takeoff, the pilots reported a problem with the hydraulic system, which is very important for controlling the plane's brakes, landing gear, and other key systems. Because of the failure, the pilots decided it was safest to turn back and land at the same airport. As they approached the runway, the plane came in fast because parts of the braking and slowing systems were not working properly. After touching down, the aircraft could not slow down as expected. It ran off the end of the runway, broke through the airport's perimeter fence, and suffered heavy damage. The right main landing gear collapsed, and the right engine tore away from the wing. Several people were injured during the accident, and sadly, one passenger, an 86-year-old woman, died a few days later from her injuries. Investigators from Guyana, along with teams from the United States and Canada, found that a loss of hydraulic fluid caused the failure. Because of this, systems like the spoilers, thrust reversers, and brakes did not work properly when the plane landed. Experts explained that without full braking and slowing power, the aircraft could not stop before reaching the end of the runway. After the crash, Jamaica Airways faced serious financial troubles and shut down operations in March 2019. Passengers later filed a lawsuit, and a settlement was reached which pays between $8,000 and $225,000 based on the level of the harm suffered. FedEx Flight 1376. FedEx Flight 1376 was a routine cargo flight traveling from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Memphis, Tennessee. The aircraft was a Boeing 757-200 carrying only packages and 3 crew members on board as part of FedEx's overnight delivery operations. Shortly after taking off on October 4, 2023, the pilots received a warning that the left hydraulic system had failed. The crew decided to turn around and land back at Chattanooga, but when they tried to lower the landing gear, it would not come down. They used all the backup systems they could, but the wheels still stayed locked inside the plane. Knowing they could not land normally, the pilots prepared for what is called a belly landing, where the plane touches down without its wheels. To be sure, they flew low over the runway so that the ground crews could look and confirm the landing gear was stuck. After getting the confirmation, they came back around and carefully brought the plane down. The plane landed on its underside, sliding across the runway for a long distance and sending up sparks. It finally came to a stop just past the end of the runway. Even though it was a dangerous landing, there was no fire, and all 3 crew members got out safely without injuries. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board later found that a hydraulic leak was the reason the landing gear could not lower. They also discovered problems with the emergency exit slides. On one side, the slide did not deploy because of a wrongly placed strap. On the other side, a faulty latch slowed down the evacuation. DHL Flight 7216. DHL Flight 7216 was a scheduled cargo flight operated by DHL Aéreo Expreso flying from Juan Santa Maria International Airport in Costa Rica to La Aurora International Airport in Guatemala City. On April 7, 2022, the aircraft, a Boeing 757-200, took off carrying 2 crew members and a full load of packages and freight for overnight delivery. Shortly after takeoff, while climbing through about 19,000 feet, the pilots got warnings showing low hydraulic fluid pressure in the left hydraulic system. The crew quickly declared an emergency and decided to head back to the airport. Before landing, they stayed in the air for a while to burn off extra fuel since the Boeing 757 can't dump fuel mid-flight. When they landed, the plane touched down smoothly at first, but during the rollout, it suddenly veered sharply to the right. It skidded off the runway, slid across the grass, and slammed into a ditch near the airport's fire station. The impact was so hard that the plane broke into 2 large sections. The tail completely separated from the rest of the fuselage. Thankfully, both pilots escaped without injuries and were able to exit the aircraft safely. Investigators later found that the hydraulic system failed because of stress and fatigue in a flexible hose connected to the landing gear system. They also found that during the landing, the pilot accidentally moved the right engine's thrust reverser and the left engine's thrust lever at the same time, likely out of muscle memory. This mistake made it harder to control the plane on the ground.